Hi, everyone. It's really good to be with you today virtually. My name is Mary Culler, and I serve as the director of the Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition, also known as Stream Teams United. We are a 501c3 nonprofit here in the state of Missouri. We were formed in 1999, and we work in partnership with the Missouri Stream Team program that is sponsored by the Conservation Department and the Department of Natural Resources and the Conservation Federation of Missouri. And our work is to try to promote and facilitate education, stewardship, and advocacy for Missouri's rivers and streams. And here in the state of Missouri, we are really blessed to live in this state because we have so many wonderful water resources. And I'm originally from Springfield, Missouri, here in Southwest Missouri. And I grew up just kind of, loving the Ozark streams. And I went on to pursue a career in biology and fisheries science. And so I worked as a fisheries biologist for a number of years and then worked in water quality with the state of Missouri. But I've been in my role with the nonprofit organization for about 5 years now. And I work all across the state. I live in Northeast Missouri now, but I work with stream team volunteers all across the state. And we're excited that we are working with the Lean Learning Foundation and other nonprofit groups and local people there in Neosho on the Shoal Creek water restoration project there at the confluence site north of town. So I know many of you have probably had an opportunity to visit the confluence site, and maybe you helped plant trees there. I was there in November and had a great time joining some of the students in Neosho as we planted 1,600 trees that weekend, which is really awesome. And so today I'm going to share with you a little bit about the aquatic life of the Shoal Creek watershed and some of the really interesting, neat creatures that call that place home, and share with you just why, the Shoal Creek watershed, Hickory Creek, where you live there in the larger Spring River watershed, why that is such a special place. And so I'm going to share my screen and see, I've got a little PowerPoint for you. So hopefully you all will be able to see this when the recording is over. But again, we're going to talk about aquatic life of the Shoal Creek watershed. And this net here, as you can see, this is a net that some of our stream team volunteers had when they did the volunteer water quality sampling late last year. And so this is a ring crayfish. We're going to talk about crayfish later in this presentation. But first, when we talk about Shoal Creek, we use the word watershed. So let's start by talking about, what is a watershed? Okay, so a watershed is simply the area of land that drains precipitation to a certain body of water. And so we all live in a watershed. Everyone on planet Earth lives in a watershed, and creeks, streams, lakes, wetlands all receive water from their watershed. So it's simply the boundaries, and it's determined by topography or the elevation of an area, because we all know water flows downstream. So watersheds and their boundaries have not been decided by politicians. They haven't been decided by people. They are determined by the elevation of an area, and simply that water flows downstream. So we all live in a watershed. Here in Missouri, all water, unless it infiltrates into groundwater or evaporates or gets consumed by plants and animals, all water in Missouri is eventually flowing to the Mississippi River and then to the Gulf of Mexico. Again, unless it goes somewhere else in the water cycle. So it's really neat to think about when you think about the water in your glass of water that you might be drinking, or the water in the stream. That water has cycled around the globe so many times. We talk about how old water is. It's old. It's been here. We just keep reusing it. When we talk about watersheds, sometimes we use the term HUC or HUC. And so HUC is a scientific word that is used widely by the United States Geological Service, and it stands for Hydrologic Unit Code. So I'm going to show on the next kind of slides what the HUC number is for the Spring River and Shoal Creek watersheds. But each watershed of certain size is given a hydrologic unit code, and it's kind of like what they call a hierarchical like nesting system where the numbers, it's almost like a zip code. Okay, so you'll have a large watershed that it's identified by two codes or two numbers, and then as the watershed gets smaller, you get additional numbers. So this would be like a 4-digit watershed, or a 6-digit watershed, or an 8-digit watershed. And as you get more digits in this HUC code, the watershed's getting smaller because it's just another piece within that larger basin that's identified by some of the first digits you see there. So the Shoal Creek watershed is part of the larger Spring River watershed, and the Spring River watershed is a HUC 8 watershed, and we're going to talk a little bit about those digits later and what they mean. But the Spring River watershed, as we see outlined here in kind of this lime green color, is about 2,588 square miles in size, and you can see it includes parts of Berry and Lawrence and Dade and Newton and Jasper, Barton, Missouri, those counties in Missouri, and then also parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. So Shoal Creek, and that is now this dark green area. This is the Shoal Creek watershed, which drains water to Shoal Creek, is part of that larger Spring River watershed. And so what we have is that Shoal Creek eventually flows into the Spring River here on the other side of the state line over in Kansas. Okay, so when we look at the HUC numbers, we know the Spring River HUC 8 has these 8 digits that kind of define from a scientific point, which is where is that watershed on the globe. And then the Shoal Creek HUC 10 watershed has 2 additional digits. And there's actually 2 HUC 10s that make up this here. They have 2 HUC 10s, the headwaters of Shoal Creek and Shoal Creek HUC 10. Okay, so again, those are just the numbers to kind of describe where that's at on a map, on the global map. The Shoal Creek watershed here is about 440 square miles and includes Newton County here and near Neosho. So I want to talk a little bit about another term that we use in watershed science, and that would be stream order. So Shoal Creek is a 6th order stream when it reaches the Spring River. So we talk about how do you determine a stream's order? Okay, so tributaries that are like the first tributary that you have on a landscape are what are known as first order streams. Okay, they are the first defined channel within this larger watershed, like headwaters. If 2 first order streams come together, they make a second order stream. Okay, so we have here a first order stream meets another first order stream, it equals a second order stream. Okay, so this is something where we're going to change a little bit from your normal math where 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. In the world of stream orders, 2 plus 2 equals 3. So if you have a second order stream that meets a second order stream, it then becomes a third order stream. Again, then if you have a third order stream, meaning a third order stream, it doesn't equal 6, it equals 4. When a fourth order stream meets another fourth order stream, it becomes a fifth order stream. And when a fifth order stream meets another fifth order stream, that equals a sixth order stream. So there's some ways you could get out some maps of the Shoal Creek watershed, and they would have to be some pretty good maps that show a lot of tributaries, but kind of see how does Shoal Creek become a sixth order stream by the time it reaches the Spring River. But I just wanted to show this to you in case you ever hear that term of this is a 10th order stream or a second order stream. It's talking about essentially how many tributaries of a certain size have contributed so far to that river. So in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the cool creatures that make up the life in Shoal Creek and the Spring River. So in Missouri, we have 235 fish species. 219 of those are native species, which means they originated here before European colonization. Okay, 16 species are not native, meaning they've been introduced in, say, the last 200 or less years. And so of those 235 species, there have been over 80 fish species collected from this larger Spring River watershed. So we're going to talk about some of the special fish species that have been found here, and then kind of an overview of what you might find if you went fishing in the stream. You may not catch all these fish just with a rod and pole. That's really hard to do. But if you were ever sampling these fish as a fish biologist and had the appropriate permit and equipment to do that, where you're not always allowed to go out and sample fish, you have to have sometimes a permit from the Department of Conservation, actually, or possibly even the Fish and Wildlife Service. Anyway, these are some of the organisms that exist here in this area. So one really cool little fish is the Ozark cavefish. And on all these slides, I have in parentheses the genus and species names that's italicized. And so that's just as for scientific species, that's how you write them. They are in italics with the genus name first and then the species name. Okay, so these are, you've probably heard of cavefish. They're small, they're tiny, they're colorless because they live in the dark. They have no eyes, so they're blind because when it's dark, they don't need to see. And so these are found only in springs, cave streams, and underground waters. They exist in low densities. So if you would find some, you would not expect to find a lot. They probably feed on bat guano. And they are listed as endangered in Missouri and threatened by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which just means that there's not many of them found in Missouri, not many of them found nationwide. Okay, another species that is a little bit definitely more abundant than the Ozark cavefish is rainbow trout. These are one of those introduced species, and if you go fishing, you may be very familiar with this. If you live in Neosho, you are probably pretty familiar with rainbow trout because they're found there in Hickory Creek. Again, not native to Missouri, they are part of the salmon family. So rainbow trout originally were found on the Pacific coast from Alaska to northern Mexico, but they were brought into Missouri. And one neat thing about the Spring River is the first reported introduction of rainbow trout was right there in the Spring River watershed in Lawrence County in 1882. Since that time, they've been raised in hatcheries in cold water streams and lakes in some, and then they're stocked into cold water streams or lakes here in Missouri. In some places, there are naturally reproducing populations. And also something special in Neosho is the fish hatchery. If you've not been there, I encourage you to go there. They raise a lot of different species, but it was established in 1888, and it's the oldest continuous operating federal fish hatchery raising fish today. So that's something else cool that you all have there in Neosho is the oldest continuously operated federal fish hatchery in the United States. Pretty cool. Okay, so a lot of different fish species that might be found there in Spring River or Shoal Creek. And so this is not maybe an all exhaustive list. This is what has been documented in the resources that I was looking at, but that's not to say that there might not be other species, but these are definitely species that have been found. And so we're going to go through some of the families of fishes. This is the sunfish family Centarchidae. And so of all the different families of fishes, these might be ones that you are most familiar with. And I'll stop for a minute and say, I said the word fishes. Well, I might say, is fishes correct English? Well, if you are speaking about more than one fish species, then it is called, or they are referred to as fishes. If it's just one species, then plural is fish. Resources I used to put together this presentation is a guide to what's called the fishes of Missouri. And when it says fishes, it's talking about there's more than one species that's being referred to. And so there was a biologist named William Flieger who did a lot of surveying several decades ago and put together kind of a guide of what species are found. And then the conservation department and other research groups, they might be with universities and so forth, do sampling of Missouri's rivers and streams. And so they add their information of as far as what species they've found in our rivers. So some fishes, you have your bass, like largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, but then you also have some smaller, what you might call panfish. Rock bass or goggle eye is a really pretty little fish that's found in Missouri and in the Ozarks. We have green sunfish, which is kind of a common fish you might find in a lot of ponds. Long ear sunfish here in the middle, a very beautiful fish. And this one would be a male that's in breeding color. So with a lot of fish, the males, just kind of like birds, are more brightly colored. Some of them are just brilliantly colored, and long ear sunfish is one of those. The warmouth is an interesting little fish that kind of has some streaks along its cheek, you would say. And bluegill is a very common fish that you might find in ponds or lakes. And then same with crappie. White crappie have lines that go vertically, kind of black lines that go vertically, and then black crappie are kind of all speckled. So those are obviously, some fish you might be familiar with already. Catfish, which is family Ictaluridae. So catfish can be identified by their barbels, and they also have an adipose fin, which is something that trout have. And so the adipose fin is an extra fin on the back that's kind of like a small flap. And we could go back to rainbow trout. You see rainbow trout have this adipose fin as well. Only a couple families have that. And so we have here pictured a slender mad tom. This is a tiny little catfish. It's going to be a couple inches long. And mad tom catfish, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those later. But they're very small little catfish found in usually smaller stream systems, and they like to burrow under riffles, and they eat little invertebrates. This is a black bullhead, and it has black barbels on the underside, and a yellow bullhead. Yellow bullheads have like creamy yellowish colored barbels on the underside of their chin. And this catfish is a flathead catfish. These can get extremely large, even in like medium stream systems, because a lot of catfish will move down into larger waters during the winter so that they have to be sure that they have deep enough pools to live in throughout the winter. But then they will move back upstream during the spring when they spawn. So you can actually find some of these larger catfish in smaller to medium-sized rivers. And then channel catfish is another one. Channel catfish may be something that you're familiar with if you have a pond or if you've been to a pond that's been stocked. Okay, the Neosho mad tom. So one of the neat things about being from Neosho, living in Neosho, is you have several species that are named after your town, and we're going to talk a little bit about why are they named Neosho mad tom. What's special about Neosho? We'll get to that later. But this is a really cool little fish, the Neosho mad tom. It's a catfish, and it's the smallest Missouri catfish. It has a dark crescent shape bar across the middle of its tail fin here. The adipose fin, as I was talking about earlier, actually connects there to the tail fin or the caudal fin. Up to 3 inches, they're found in the Spring River in Jasper County. So I don't think they found this in Shoal Creek or Hickory Creek, but actually just the Spring River downstream from the North Fork tributary. It is listed as endangered in Missouri and is federally threatened by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So a limited distribution of these as far as where they're found, and also not an abundant number of them. Okay, darters. These are really cool fish. I mean, what a fun group of fish. Family Percidae, they are related actually to like walleye and yellow perch, which would be much larger fish. But these are all small little guys. Greenside darters can get fairly large, like, 4 to 5 inches without looking up that in the book. But most of these are going to be in your neighborhood of not much more than 3 inches in length. They can also be, the males can be very brightly colored, and they all have a lot of A lot of neat characteristics. They can be a little bit harder to identify, but especially if you can find the brightly colored males, that helps to identify them. So some of the ones that are pictured: greenside darter, Arkansas darter, orange throat darter, and log perch. And then there's some other darters that I don't have photos of. Really cool, neat little fish that you might find if you go and do a stream team sample and use your kick net and kick up some rocks and look and say, oh, what's in here? Well, maybe it's a good chance that you'll have some darters in your net set if you sample a riff. Minnows. There's a lot of minnow species out there in Missouri, and this is just some of them that you might be likely to run into. And some of these, again, could be in your net sets when you do your stream team sampling. This is a central stone roller, and one of the things that kind of identifies it is these bumps on its snout, so to speak. We call those tubercles. And this is most likely a male, a breeding male, because it has that brightly colored anal fin there. This is a southern red-bellied dace. They can be bright red if it's a breeding male. A striped shiner kind of has like flaky looking scales. Also, I think you could probably see it's got some of those bumps, some of those tubercles on its snout. Red shiner, they kind of have a triangular shadow on the front part behind their gill cover, and it can kind of be blue or reddish in color. Especially sometimes if you would have this fish in your hand and move it back and forth, you can kind of see that triangular shape there. And then this is a creek chub. It has like kind of a dark stripe along it, a dark marking there on the dorsal fin, and a dark marking there by the caudal fin. And creek chubs are one of the slipperiest fish in the creek. If it is like a bar of soap and hard to hold on to, it could be a creek chub. The sucker family, Catastomidae. Okay, so sucker fish have the sucker mouth, and that's because they live on the bottom of the stream. And so one of the terms we use to describe the bottom of a stream is benthic. So benthic means near the bottom. And so these fish, swim along the bottom using that sucker mouth to suck up little invertebrates, pieces of algae. So they're feeding off what's on the bottom of the stream. This is a really common sucker in the state of Missouri, the northern hog sucker, and they have kind of dark bands, if you will, on the top or across the top of their body. And so that's one that's pretty distinctive. If you're in the stream and look down and you see a fish that's on the bottom, it has like these dark bands going across it, probably a good chance it's a northern hog sucker. White suckers is another species of fish, and one of their characteristics is that they have their scales here on their lateral line. The lateral line is a feature that goes across kind of the middle of the fish's body. The scales on the white sucker are more closer together towards the front of the fish. So if you find a fish and the scales are really kind of bunched up here, but then they get more spread out, if that's a sucker, that's most likely a white sucker. It's a picture of a black buffalo, which typically, these fish will all be small at some time, but big black buffaloes can grow to be very large fish. And then a golden red horse. And red horse fishes are also in the sucker family. Some other fish species you might see are top minnows, and they, like their name suggests, live kind of around the top of the water. Mosquito fish, or gambusia, you might be familiar with. Brook silversides, also kind of our surface dwellers, and then a banded sculpin. And sculpins are really cool looking little fish. They do look kind of prehistoric, like they've been around a long time. Very neat little fish, this banded sculpin here. And banded sculpins are small. All of these are pretty small fish. Banded sculpins can get to be several inches. Okay, so let's talk about crayfish now. 5 species have been found within this region. The bristly cave crayfish, and it's a white crayfish, again, like the cave fish. It is pale in color, does have small eyes, but again, found in caves. They can be found in what they call the zone of perpetual darkness, or the twilight zone, or the outflow of springs, or shallow wells exposed to daylight. The Neosho midget crayfish. Here we go again, another fish that is named after your town. And why is that? We'll talk about that later. But it's a small crayfish, and one of its distinctive characteristics is this band, this black saddle mark across the junction of the carapace and the abdomen. So only up to 2 inches, found only in the Neosho drainage of southwest Missouri and northern Arkansas. So I kind of gave that away there of why it's called Neosho. But yeah, they're found in the Ozark streams over gravel or rocky substrate, and they dig short tunnels in areas of small gravel or beneath boulders. The ring crayfish, this is the one that was shown on the front slide, but this is one that is really common across the state of Missouri and can get to be quite large. They are characterized by this black band on the tip of their pinchers. And again, they can get up to almost 4 inches. So fairly large crayfish as far as crayfish go. The northern or virile crayfish, this is also a common species around the state. They can be kind of large, greenish brown, and they have yellow bumps or tubercles on the inner margins of their pinchers. If you can see here, these bumps. They can get up to about 5 inches. That would be one of your larger crayfish. But they are found widely throughout Missouri and also widely throughout the United States and also even up to Canada. These are found a lot throughout Missouri, so it can be common that you run into them, but not all the time. Okay, grassland crayfish. And so this is more of a red crayfish, and this is one that's not really in water most of the time. It's found in grasslands or areas that were formerly native grasslands, and they dig burrows up to 6 feet or more in depth, often a long distance from water. Now, the juveniles and occasionally adults are found in wet habitats. Okay, so moving on to mussel species. And there is a diverse community of mussels that have been found in the Spring River watershed. And it's neat that a lot of mussel species are named after other animals. So you see here we have things such as pigtoe. There's others not on this list, but others that are called monkey face or deer toe, I believe. Several mussel species. A few that I'm going to mention. One is, again, the Neosho mucket. So you guys have the Neosho madtom, the Neosho crayfish, Neosho midget crayfish, and the Neosho mucket. 3 species named after Neosho. There's no other town in Missouri that has both a fish and a crayfish and a mussel named after it. You all are special. This species is so special, it's actually listed as a state and federal endangered species. So not many of these out there. It is light brown with green rays, and it's found in moderately flowing water. So mussels in general have declined over the years due to a number of factors, and they are one of the more sensitive species. And we could talk more about that at some time. I think we will potentially talk more about mussels in another presentation at some time. So why Neosho crayfish, catfish, and mussel? Well, first, Neosho is a Native American word, and you may know this living in Neosho, but it's a Native American word generally accepted to be of the Osage language, and it's translated variously as water that has been made muddy, clear cold water, or clear water. Okay, so the last, clear water, is the most widely accepted understanding of the word Neosho. Why Neosho, crayfish, catfish, and mussel? Is it named after your town? Well, not really. It's most likely named after like the Neosho River, which is a tributary of the Arkansas River. And the Neosho River begins in eastern Kansas and goes through northeastern Oklahoma. And the Spring River, of which Shoal Creek drains into, joins the Neosho River at Grand Lake of the Cherokees in Oklahoma. Okay, so remember we were talking about huck units earlier, and what is a huck? So Shoal Creek's watershed's code is this, and I won't read all of that, but what do the first digits stand for? So the 11 stands for the Arkansas White and Red Rivers. 1107 stands for Neosho Verdigris Rivers, but the 110702 stands for the Neosho River. So basically what we're getting at is the Spring River and Shoal Creek sit inside, or they are located within inside this larger Neosho River watershed that originates in Kansas and is a tributary to the Grand Lake of the Cherokees. So my thinking is that Neosho crayfish, catfish, and mussel are more named after this larger watershed. Okay, and so this map I wanted to show you, this is you're here in Neosho, and we have um, Shoal Creek coming in here north of town, and then it goes northwest towards Joplin, joins the Spring River here. The Spring River flows south to Grand Lake of the Cherokees, but this river coming in here from Kansas and northwest Oklahoma is the Neosho River. So the Neosho River and the Spring River meet here in this northern tributary of Grand Lake of the Cherokees. And so if you're living in Neosho and didn't know there was a Neosho River, that's something I just wanted to share with you. Okay, macroinvertebrates. So if you've done the stream team training, you've had a chance to see some of these really neat little critters that live in our streams. And most of these are larvae or nymphs that then turn into flying insects. Okay, so when we talk about macroinvertebrates, they're not microorganisms, because microorganisms we would need to have a microscope to see. These are macroinvertebrates. Invertebrates mean they don't have a backbone, but macro meaning that we can see them with the naked eye. And we don't need a microscope to see them. Now, if you have a microscope, like a dissecting microscope, you can see them much better. You can kind of look at them like we're seeing on the slide. So I'm just going to go over some of the groups of macroinvertebrates you might see out there. And if you've done the stream team training, you've had the opportunity to learn more about these. But stoneflies, mayflies. So stoneflies have two tail structures, if you will, all the time. Mayflies have three tail structures. Now there is one family of mayflies that only have two. The baited mayflies of the family Betidae only have two tails. But if you see three, that would be a mayfly. Caddisflies. These are the order Trichoptera. This is a free-living caddisfly. Some caddisflies make homes, which is really cool. They make these little homes for themselves out of rocks or a combination of rocks and twigs. But this caddisfly here is what we would call a net spinning caddisfly, and it doesn't necessarily make it a hard case house. Some other types of macroinvertebrates are alderfly and dobsonfly larvae. And beetles like water penny beetles, which are really cool little species, or group of beetles. Fly larvae, black fly larvae, crane fly larvae, midge larvae or chironomid larvae. And there's more. I'm not including all macroinvertebrates on this presentation because I think that's a whole other presentation that the stream team program provides that if you haven't done that already, there's a lot of resources out there. But dragonflies and damselflies. So, overall, the Shoal Creek watershed is rich in aquatic life. This is just a small glimpse of some of the things that live in your watershed, either in Hickory Creek, Shoal Creek, or the larger Spring River. There are ways that anyone can help be a part of being a steward of your local stream. Some ways are to join a Missouri stream team and learn more, participate in local stream team activities, So if you haven't been involved in the stream team efforts yet locally, I'd encourage you to look into that more. It's free, it's super fun to do, and it's a way to do something positive in your community. Planting native trees and plants. Uh, Trees and plants are so powerful to help remove pollutants from stormwater and reduce erosion in a watershed. So one of the resources we recommend, if you haven't checked it out yet, is visit grownative.org. It has so much information about how to grow native plants, where to get native plants, what they do for nature, for your community. So native plants, very important in our watersheds. And then just one other thing, there's a lot of things people can do to help improve their water, but reduce your use of plastic. That's something that's become well known about in the last decade or so. It's just how much plastic is out there now in the environment. So try to reduce your use of plastic and just be aware of what is poured or flushed down the drain. Don't send pollutants or plastics into downstream water. So anything that you're flushing down the toilet, or putting down a sink could potentially reach a downstream water body. The wastewater plant does not remove everything, and some things cause problems for the wastewater plant. So just, be mindful not to send stuff down the drains unless it's meant to be. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed just this brief overview of aquatic life in your watershed there, and ways to find out more. You can visit shoalcreekwatershed.org, moststreamteam.org, or streamteamsunited.org. And so I appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a chance to get out to the creek and take a net and, see what you find.